Welcome to Seth's Daily Podcast here on Nighthawk Radio. Check out Nighthawk Radio. Go to nighthawk-radio.com. We're blessed enough to have an interview with Joe Flippo, Bigfoot hunter. How you doing tonight, man?
Good. How you doing, Seth? Good to
Doing
see you
good,
again.
brother. Ah, man, I definitely appreciate you being on, man. Last interview was fun. I know the interview you guys did with Awakening Radio, that was a fun one as well. So anytime we can
Yeah.
get you on, brother, it's always fun, man.
Hey, it's always good to help out good people.
Appreciate you, man. You're a good person as well, man. I appreciate you. And how long have you been in the Bigfoot hunting?
This August was my 20th anniversary. Oh, August 5th, 2005 was the first time I actually saw one. And we've talked about that before in the past, but it's been 20 years now.
Definitely, man. And I know you've had some people call you to come investigate their properties and homes and stuff. So, what's some of the stories that you have investigated?
Well, I started out let's see, in 2005, the first person that I investigated their house was a coworker of mine in Southeast Texas. He had cows on his property, um, and he had a grain bin that was being raided weekly. It wasn't unusual for him to come up with five or six bags of sweet feed gone a day. And he was getting to the point where he didn't know if anybody, human wise, was stealing it, because it was out in a field that wasn't surrounded by anything. It's just a barn out in a field that he went and where he treated his cows if he needed them, or where he kept his feed so he didn't have to run back and forth to town to get his feed, and he had that coming up missing. Well, his first thing he did was he put heavy locks on the doors. He reinforced it was a cypress wood barn that they used, so it was tough wood, But he would when he put his sweet feet in there, something was coming and ripping the door off, and he wasn't finding any kind of prints or anything at the time, and he thought it was people coming up there stealing his sweet feet, and so he went and put a more secure door on there. Made out of solid 6 inch thick cypress boards. He had them cut at the mill for that purpose. He made a door out of it. He anchored the door in the wall, and he put several locks on it, and it was ripped off, that door. And he's like, uh, Joe, there ain't no way a person is ripping this door off without equipment, and there's no tire marks, there's nothing. So he said, "What do you think's doing it?" And I laughed at him a little bit. I said, "What do you want me to say? You think, or say I think, or does it?" And he said, "Well, something's eating sweet feed. He's eating a lot of it." He said, "I know you've told people up here at work, and we were working at the same place, that you saw a Sasquatch." He said, "I kind of think that may be what it is." Oh, he said, "But I don't know anything about those animals." I said, "I don't know much about them either. I just seen one a couple of weeks ago at that point." I said, "But we can figure something out." So we went up there, and he took me up there, and we drove down to the barn and looked at where he had his stuff there. He had his tractor pulled in there and parked next to the barn uh, door that he'd put back up there because he didn't want it ripped off again. And he was thinking if that tractor was parked right there, couldn't nothing get to it. And we looked at it, and he pulled his tractor out and showed me his new door he'd put on and everything. and opened it up, and it had his sweet feed in there, and it had deer corn in there. It didn't have just sweet feed. It was a bin where he put his bagged animal food in, and so he said, you know, it's funny. Uh, They'll grab sweet feed, but they never grab just regular corn. He said, I'd rather them just grab the regular corn because that's cheaper on me. He said, but they must have a sweet tooth like that sweet feed. And so we got to looking, and up in the rafters, I seen there was a place. I was like, do you have any kind of game cameras? Uh, he's game camera. He said, I do out in the woods. I said, well, have you ever seen anything on them? He's like, no. He said, I've had them pushed down a time or two, but I've never seen anything that actually did it. I figured it's the wind doing it. And I said, well, let's go get a game camera. And he had a big boxy game camera. It was a homemade job that he'd done, but it run off of VHS tape. And when I seen it, I asked him. I said, "How's it exactly does this work?" He said, "I turn it on and it runs for 12 hours." He said, and I go back and I take me another VHS tape and I stick it in there and it runs for 12 hours. I said, so it's recording all the time. He said, yeah. I said, well, if something's getting in this barn, we'll use this right here and we'll catch whatever it is. And so we pulled the tractor back inside the barn so we could get up there to that rafter, and we put it on the rafter, shining down on that door. And then we pulled the tractor, or he pulled the tractor out enough so that there was a free space to that door. And this was about, I guess, 5:30 in the evening when we did this. It was in September, like this time of year, and the sun was about to go down, but it hadn't went down yet. And so when we got through, it was about 5:30, and we got it mounted and pointed at the door, and we left. And that next day, didn't nothing happen. The next day, didn't nothing happen, and he went and he just said he rewound the tape since it didn't nothing to catch, and he rewound the tape and put it back in there. And that third day, uh, we was at work, and he come up to me. He was a maintenance supervisor. He said, "Hey, I got something I want to show you." He said, "But not here." He said, "Stop by the house after you get off work." I said, "All right." So we worked the same shift, and after work, it was later in the evening, and I stopped at his house. I worked 3 to 11 shift at that time, so it was after midnight when I got to his house, and he said, "We caught something on there." I said, "Really?" He said, yes. He said, "You're not going to believe what we got on here." He said, "There are gorillas in Southeast Texas." I said, "No, I don't know if I believe that." He said, "You ain't got to believe it. You're going to see it." And he turned on the bit on the TV, and then he turned on the VHS VCR. And he when he pushed play, it come up, and you could hear something for a little bit before you seen it, but it walked in on all fours, just like a gorilla does. It was big. He had a F-100 tractor, is a smaller farm tractor that there. If you know what an F-100 tractor is, so it's not the biggest, but it's a good sized tractor. And that thing's shoulders come up to the top of the rim on the back tires with him walking on all fours. And he walked around there, and he seen that tractor, and he got to smelling, and it acted like it heard the VCR recording. Oh, I know. You know those VCRs, they click a little bit whenever they're recording stuff. And it started looking around, and it started looking under the tractor for that clicking sound. It started looking around, and while I was underneath there, there was oil on the differential on the tractor down there, and he rubbed his hand up underneath the tractor and got oil on his hand, and he smelled it and he licked it like that right there, and uh, made a face like he didn't like the taste of it. But then he went around to the door and he started shaking on the door, back and forth on the door till the door got loose, and then he took and he ripped that whole door off and splintered the hinges where the hinges were on that door. It splintered all of it, and it looked around like it was making sure that it didn't make too much noise, and like somebody's going to hear him. And then he went inside and he come out with a 50-pound bag of sweet feed under his arm like he'd took a sack of taters. And he looked around a little bit, looked around, sniffed around the tractor. Then he stood up on two legs and walked off on two legs. And that's the last we saw on that video. And he cut the video off. I said, I'd like to have a copy of that. He said, nope. He said, I got this right here to show my kids and grandkids what's on the property. He said, there ain't nobody else going to see this. He said, the only reason why I'm showing it to you is because it was your idea to film it and get it on camera. He said, no, we've got it good enough to where we can see it. He said it ain't the best quality video, but it's good enough for the kids to know that there's something out there.
Did he have any more experiences at his property with Bigfoot after that?
Yeah, he's probably still has issues with him. I hadn't talked with him in a couple of years, but it was ongoing. Even after I moved back up here, he would call me sometimes, and what he ended up doing was electrifying his. Oh, he made an outer door and he electrified it. Oh, so when they touch it, that it shocks them, which may not be legal, but it protects his property. As he put a 110 cord on a steel door, and that stopped it from grabbing that door.
The strength that Bigfoot has is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Well, you think about a gorilla, a Highland gorilla or silverback, for example. They're only 5 feet tall and they're 8 times as strong as a human. You look at something that has that same body strength index and that same weight to strength ratio, and it's 9, 10 feet tall. That thing's a lot more than twice as strong as that Highland gorilla. Um, sitting inside a car, you wouldn't even be safe because it could rip the door off the car if it wanted to. I mean, it's just that much strength. And people say, well, oh, do Sasquatch use tools? I don't think so because they don't need them. I mean, they've got the strength to tear up anything they need to, literally. And it it's just we use tools because we're not strong enough to do that.
Have you seen any like Bigfoot nest in the woods?
Yeah. I've even come across what I call nursing stations or or nurseries there that I found. I've got a good friend of mine up in Memphis that has them on his property, and they come. They they don't stay on his property. They come about once every 4 years, and then the little ones stay there for about 18 to 20 months before they move on to other places. But you can see in his property, he's got trees where you can see where something has climbed that tree and then slid down, and the whole side of the tree, the bark is just plumb slick from that, and you can see where they've made structures where I believe it's to teach those little ones to climb and to walk, and there'll be trees that will be pushed down. And it's like these tree structures you see people where they've got the broke trees weaved in with the living trees, and there'll be different shapes and stuff. And it'll, in my opinion, and from what I understand, just by deducing my own deductions, is the ones that are laid down more flat, that's for the younger ones to climb on and to play on. And when you get the steeper ones and stuff, that's for the older ones, or as they improve their abilities to walk on the tree limbs and stuff, it helps them learn to climb. And I think they stay in their trees until they're about 5.5, 6 foot tall. Um, because until they get about that size, that they're still not the apex predator, but they're strong enough to they take on a grizzly bear at 5 feet tall, or a
That's
black bear
impressive.
down here. Yeah.
Definitely, man. The strength that Bigfoot has, though, is insane, man. And you said they're really fast as well, right?
Oh yeah, I've seen them run uh, probably 30 miles an hour, and it's not putting a bind on them as far as their breathing goes. And when you hear them breathe, it sounds like a horse breathing. It's like their lungs capacity is probably 5, 6 times ours, easy.
And you've heard Bigfoot like communicate with other Bigfoots, haven't you?
Yeah, you can hear them whooping. And that's the thing. Whenever they're communicating, oh, they'll whoop back and forth with each other. And but they'll also they don't just hoop when they communicate. Like you'll hear one. Oh, say I go into the woods, for example, and one sees me. He will. He may holler down into the valley where the other ones are, and they're not going to holler back. You may hear tree knocks, or you may hear a limb crack, or you may hear rocks clack together, but they don't ever holler back like that. And that may be, it may just depend on what what the situation is. But I know sometimes you can hear them hollering, and whenever one hollers and it's way far off, you wait a little bit and you might hear another one holler. But if one does a real long holler, another one might just ha real loud. And it'd be a different sound, but it's basically telling each other where they are. And it may be like people, you ask somebody, hey, how you doing? They may say, oh, I'm pretty good, or I'm okay, or not bad, something like that. And their vocalizations may be as different as ours are in that respect. It's not like you can go and say, okay, I'm going to bang on this tree 3 times, and then there's going to be a Sasquatch over yonder. He's going to say, okay, well, you're right there. I'm going to bang on the tree 3 times so you know I'm right here. And it does, you can't count on that happening all the time. And that's what makes it different from other animals. And they're hard, they're harder to find in the woods for that reason.
Definitely. And you was telling me about a story where you was investigating where like juvenile Bigfoots was hitting on this guy's house and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Uh, yeah, went and investigated that. The guy called and told me, he said, we have activity here. And he's a younger guy. He had small kids. Him and his wife hadn't been married too many years, but they were at the point where they were getting ready to move. He's like, my wife is terrified. He said, this thing is coming up, beating on the house, is throwing rocks on the roof, is shaking the doorknob. He's like, I don't know what to do. He said, I feel stupid calling and asking you what I should be doing because he didn't believe in Bigfoot in the beginning. And he said, but there's no other option. He said, I'm grasping at straws. And I kind of sat there and let him talk a little. When I said, listen, there's nothing stupid about looking at all of your options. I said, well, I'll come down and we'll look and see. And I went down on a Wednesday. And during the day, and he was off work because he was off work that day, and we walked his property, and we looked and seen some tree or limb twists and some little stuff that by itself wouldn't mean it was a Sasquatch there, but all together was a pretty good indication. And so I said I'll come back this weekend and we'll see what we're doing if they don't come back before then. And I did stay later into the evening that day, and didn't nothing happen. And that weekend, that next weekend on Saturday, I come back down there. And I was like, I told him, I said, listen, I'll set up in the wood in the a barn. I said they'll be in the woods, and we'll see what's going on here with them. And that night, it was a group of four juveniles came out, and it reminded me so much of human teenagers doing antics. One would go and hit the fence. Oh, they had a fence around their house, and didn't nothing happen. So then the next one would go, and he would hit the mailbox, and it didn't nothing happen. Well, the third one went up, and he slapped the side of the house, and that's when the man heard him. And I was talking to him on the phone, and he's like, oh, what's going on out there? And I was telling him what was going on. I was like, listen, this is just juveniles, so playing around. They're bored. It's just like a bunch of kids. I said, hey, about that time, the fourth one threw a rock and it hit on his house. He had a corrugated metal roof, and the rocks are run down the roof. I said, that's a different one. I said, these things, they're just playing. And so I said, if this was an adult that was trying to intimidate you, and about that time, the first one that slapped the fence went up and grabbed the doorknob and was rattling the doorknob. Well, he went to the doorknob and grabbed the door to open it, and that one ran all the way back to the woods. I mean, he was gone. And I told him, I said, this here, if this would have been an adult that was meaning you harm, he would have ripped that door off and went in. He said he was. This one's afraid that Daddy is going to find out that he's harassing people, and he run back to the woods. And so we talked for a little while, and the other ones run back in the woods after doing their stuff. And the fence line on the woods run around towards where the barn was, where I was, and they were following the tree line. And I told him, I said, listen, you don't have to be afraid of this. I know it's scary. Your wife don't know what it is, but we we figure something out on this, I think. And they come around the backside and they come inside the barn. Oh, there was a breezeway there between the two sides of the barn, like most barns have. And they come in, and I cleared my throat and huffed a little bit, and they seen me up in the top of the barn, and they like to knocked each other down trying to get out of that barn. And it was just they looked just like a bunch of gorillas. Uh, their face was a little bit different. They had the hooded nose that looked like it'd been smushed down on their face, but they were they were basically juveniles. You know, they had they had the characteristics of kids. They wasn't all robust like a grown up. They were all scrawny little. You'd think they was a billy ape if you didn't know what a Sasquatch was, and you knew what a billy ape was. You'd think they were billy apes, and they were gone. They didn't try to posture. Once they seen me in the top of that barn, and I was standing up there, and they recognized me as an adult human. Oh, you know, they had big bodies, but they still had a childlike mind, and they got out of there. And so I was on the phone. I was talking with him, and he he's like, "What's all that noise out there?" Because they could hear the noise from the house. And I was like, "Well, they come in the barn, and I'm in the barn, and they like to kill each other, getting out of the breezeway back in the woods because it scared them." And so I went down and got out of the barn and went back to the house, and we sat over there. I said, "I don't think they'll come back tonight because they're as scared as they are." I said, "But they may be a few days from now, they may come out." I said, "Whenever you hear them doing that, oh, just go outside and holler at them like they're a bunch of teenage kids." I said, "Don't look at their size because they're bigger than us, but their minds are small, just like kid minds." I said, "You can have a big kid and he got a small mind, and he's gonna know, that you're the boss." I said, and these already know you're the boss. They're just playing around because they're bored. And so we stayed there till I stayed there till a little bit after midnight, and they didn't come back. Oh, and so I left. Well, oh, that next week, they didn't come back. And then, well, they didn't come back till I think it was Wednesday that week, if I remember right. Oh, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday they went there, and then Wednesday they were coming back. They come back. I think's what it was. And he called me on the phone. He said, "I heard a rock hit my roof." And I said, "Well, go out there and holler at them. Tell them they better quit, or you're gonna tell their daddy, and you're gonna get on." I said, "It sounds stupid, but it may work." He said, "Well, it's worked about as good as anything else, I guess." And so he went out there, and I was on the phone with him. He opened the door and hollered at them. And as soon as he opened the door, they started running back towards the woods, and he started hollering at them and telling them what I told him to say. And they would they didn't mess with the house that very often after that. Every now and then, but uh, it wasn't a nightly thing after that. And they ended up staying in their house, and I reckon they still live in there. But it's just you've got to learn to coexist with them, figure out what they like, what they don't like, and come to an agreement of some kind.
Definitely, man. And you also had a another investigation where somebody like Bigfoot was getting into somebody's garden.
Yeah, that there was a older couple down in central Alabama that the guy thought his nephews and a brother-in-law was getting in his garden, getting his stuff out of there right before harvest time, and oh, he ended up going down there and seeing a big footprint in the dirt, and he'd heard me on another a Bigfoot podcast, and he got the information from the host, and he called me up and asked me a lot of questions about it. And eventually, I said, "Well, listen, I'm in Northwest Alabama. Oh, where are you at?" And he told me, he said, "Oh, I'm in Central Alabama." And I said, "Well, I'll drive down if you want me to. I'll come down there and we'll look and see what's going on." And we went down there, or I went down there, and I spent a weekend with him and his wife, and they were really gracious people. I mean, they knew what Southern hospitality was, and in the process, we looked and walked around his property, and he had a lot of markers showing that there was activity there. And I told him, I said, they're getting your food out of your garden. He said, yes. I said, well, this here is a food source. They'll fight you over a food source. He said, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. He said, they haven't been doing it except the last couple of years. He said, I don't know where they come in from. He said, but I wish they'd leave. I said, well, I don't know if you get them to leave or not, but we can do something, maybe to get them not to mess with your stuff. And he's like, well, what do you suggest I do? I said, well, to be honest with you, I'd plant them their own garden, and I'd plant me my own garden. And I would go down in the woods when I dug it up and planted it, and I'd point at this one, and I'd say, this one's y'all's. And I'd holler it out. I said, I'd let them know. I said, they gonna be watching you down there. I said, but if you feel like something's watching you, it probably is. He said, yeah, I get creepy feelings all the time when I'm on the backside of my garden down there. I said, well, then they're probably watching you. Just tell them, look, this is yours, and then go up out of yours and say, this one's mine. I said, and plant their garden. I said, you go and you work your garden all you want. You don't touch their garden. Don't weed it. Don't do nothing. That's theirs. If they want it, they can weed it themselves, and you just leave it alone. And that next year, when he planted his garden, that's what he did. He went down there and he told them, "This is y'all's, and this is mine." And he told me that later that year, he said, I've had no problems with my garden this year. He said, nobody's taking stuff out of it. He said, but I went down there and looked at that other garden for them. He said, and theirs is all gone. They got all theirs. And I said, well, that's good. At least you got yours, or you got an understanding. And he said, yeah, my wife's even had watermelons and tomatoes up here on the porch, or brought up here and sat on the porch, and said, it's got to be them bringing it because they got giant muddy handprints on them, and they got muddy prints on the porch. He said she just hollered thank you out in the woods and tucked the stuff inside and didn't complain about the dirty handprints they left on the porch. He said, but I'm going to start doing that from now on, and if that works, that works. And so yeah, that was another successful thing, I think. Anyway, even though they didn't leave, they learned to get along.
Sounds like Bigfoot was understanding what he was saying too.
Yeah, I honestly think they understand language just like me and you do. Um, when I'm in the woods, and I've done this since 2005, I'd go in the woods by myself camping. I've always been a hunter, and I've always been in the woods. Oh, when I went in there and built me a fire, if I heard something popping around and walking around the edge of my camp, I talk to them. I don't necessarily look at them, but I just say, "Hey, I know you there. Look, I'm out here. I'm not after your stuff." Or if I'm hunting, I say, "Look, I'll leave you the gut pile." That. and I got to eat too. I'm doing my stuff. But I'll leave you the gut pile, and I wouldn't have any problems out of it. I would get some that would get curious, and they'd be watching what I do when I'd be cooking or something, and I'd move around, so they would have to move around to see what I'm doing. I always kept my back to the side where they were doing it, and I had one come out one night, and it was a large male. He was a young male. I don't know if he's fully grown up or not, but he was out there watching me, and he would huff and blow whenever I'd move, like he was getting mad because I was blocking his view where he couldn't see what I was cooking. So. I was cooking onions and bell pepper and fajita meat uh, in the pan. So I took my stuff out, and I lit the grease in my pan, and I turned around, and he was looking. He was throwing him a temper tantrum till he saw that fire, and then he just stopped and was staring at it. Uh, I don't know if he's afraid of it or if he was interested in it, but the fact that I was holding that skillet with that fire in it, it stopped that temper tantrum. And that's when I learned that I could use their curiosity against them. They get mad and upset or whatever, and then they would stop and look at something that if they didn't know what it was. It's almost like their curiosity was the default mechanism on them, and that to me says that they're really intelligent. If they was just a regular animal, you couldn't trick them into wanting to know what something else was. Or if they were mad, they would just be mad. But these, whenever they get mad and they get upset, they can still be, you can still show them something interesting. And I've done something just as easy as I've been in the woods with no fire and heard one grunting and huffing a little bit, and I take out my cigarette lighter and I flick it, not so that it made a flame, but just so it sparked. And in the dark with that light like that right there, and they can see it. Oh, that was enough just to calm that one down and him wanting to know what I was doing. And I always make sure that I talk to them. If one comes around, I introduce myself. It's almost like they understand that decent people will introduce themselves, and I will sit there and I will introduce myself. I will tell them what I'm doing there. I'll tell them how long I think I'm going to be there, unless they want me to leave. If they just don't want me there, I tell them I'll leave. But I make a point that they understand that I know they're there. I'm not afraid of them being there, and if I'm not wanted there, I'll go somewhere else. Um, I was on a camping trip in Missouri here a while back, year before last, and it might have been the first of last year. And I was at my camping site, and they were throwing rocks in the campsite there, or they were throwing it at the campfire. And it was more than one of them that was there. And I said, "Look, I know y'all here. Oh, I've had a rough week. I'm just looking for a quiet place to relax a little while." And the rocks stop coming in. Oh, they quit throwing them. And I sat there a little while. I said, "Listen, I'm only going to be here a day or two. If you don't want me here, fine. I'll leave. But this is a pretty place. It's quiet. It's close to the river, and I am just trying to have a good time." And I felt stupid talking. I didn't say nothing when I said that, but I heard a limb break, and that was it. For the rest of the night, they were gone. So uh, I do believe they understand language, and I know at least one of them does because whenever I was down here in Natchez Trace, down by Cedar Creek, there was one throwing uh, hickory nuts at me, and I just looked over. I said, "Quit!" And it was a little bitty one. He was a juvenile. He wasn't but about 4 or 5 feet tall. He wasn't too old. And I said, "Quit!" And he looked at me and he looked away and he started digging around at the ground like a little kid. Remind me of a little kid that just got chastised for doing something. And I sat there thinking, I wonder if he actually understands what I said. So I said, "Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you." And I said that real kind of loud and kind of gruff. And he looked up at me and he kept his eyes on me the whole time. And I think he understood what I said, or he wouldn't have looked at me when I said that. Because up to this point, he'd been looking at the ground, looking everywhere but at me. But when I said, "Hey, you look at me when I'm talking to you," and he looked right up at me, I mean, instantly. So I do think they understand language.
Definitely, man. I think they're very intelligent. I don't know if you call them creatures or animals or human-like.
I almost that's a tough one for me because the more I know and the more I think I got it figured out, I learn something different that makes me think. Oh, 90% of the time I see them, they act just like a gorilla. I mean, they're sitting there. I've seen them groom each other. I've seen them sit there and run their fingers through their another one's hair, just like it's grooming, like you see gorillas on TV do. But I've also seen them do stuff that makes me think that they're more than just that. They're very intelligent. It I say they're a primate. If they're a gorilla, they're or a primate. It's in the same way that we are primates. You know, they may be an archaic person that's not got any civility about them. If you take everything that's civilized away from us and put us as just the basis of what a human is, you would probably have a Sasquatch. Um, and they're really intelligent on things. I believe that whenever they communicate with people, that even though they may not be able to sit and have a conversation like you and I are having right now, they understand enough and they can do enough hand signals and they can do enough simple words that they can understand and you can communicate with them if they want to. It's like anything else. You get people that don't want to communicate, and if they're from a different race, they'll act like they don't understand English or they can't talk or whatever. But you can always figure out how somebody understands you or not, and it's the same way with them.
Yeah, they're very intelligent, Bigfoot are.
Hmm.
Definitely, man. And I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years, man. Every time that you've had an encounter with Bigfoot, have they had like a very foul smell?
No, not every time. Oh, I think it depends on the individual. I've had some that I smelt them before they got there, but I've been close enough to touch one, and that one didn't smell at all. Oh, matter of fact, I thought it was somebody was pulling a prank on me and had made one, and it was at a work site where I'd reported what I saw and had video to prove that it wasn't a bear. And when I reported it, the people that I reported it to kind of thought it was funny, I guess. I don't know. They told other people, and then I had other workers that would laugh at me. And I thought when I saw this one in the field over there that somebody had built one and set it there. Oh, and the reason why I thought it was fake at first is I drove up on it with a spotlight, and its eyes didn't dilate when I hit it with a spotlight. It had big pupils about the size of a quarter, and it was about 8.5 feet tall. I had a Kubota side by side that had 24-inch tires on it. It's 4-wheel drive, and I stood on the hood of that Kubota from about 15 feet away and looked at, and I was looking it in the eyes. That's how tall that thing was. And I'm 5'8", so it had to be every bit of 8.5 feet tall. And I shined the spotlight in its face. Its eyes, like I said, they didn't constrict. Uh, they were the color of dried blood. It had a coppery brown color to it, and I'd always thought, well, people say that their eyes is the color of blood. I can understand it. That one's was a coppery brown color, and he never blinked. He never moved. It was almost like he was on pause. And I jumped down and I walked around that thing and I looked him up and down. And I was like, man, this is a good thing. Whoever made this made it. They spent time on this. And I went out to touch it to see what the fur felt like. And before I touched it, it flexed both of its hands. And when it flexed both of its hands, that's when I knew it was real. And I was within my arm's length of it at that time. And I shined a spotlight in its face and I just backed up. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, you're real. I thought you wouldn't. And I backed up and got back to my Kubota. And when I cut the spotlight off his face, he turned 180 degrees. And how he did it, I don't know, but he exploded into that underbrush. Uh, After he got gone, I was just sitting there stunned. He moved so fast away from me. He could have, and that showed me he could have had me anytime he wanted me. But he turned and he went from standing still. I looked where he made his first step at, and it was 15 feet from me. How he had that much energy to go and charge or jump 15 feet at one time and go, I don't know. But he was gone. And it looked just like somebody drove a tractor through that underbrush. He tore up, broke trees, saplings. He tore up blackberry vines. It looked just like he run right through there. And I took my supervisor out there the next morning. I worked graveyard shift at that job, and 6 in the morning the supervisor come in. He replaced me at 7, and I said, "Hey, you think I'm crazy?" He kind of laughed. He said, I wonder sometimes why. And I said, well, I want to show you something, and you tell me if it was here yesterday. And I went and showed him where that thing run through the woods and tore up that underbrush. I said, he said, there's significant property damage here. This wasn't here yesterday. I said, well, come on, I'm going to show you what did it. And we got off, and I went, and he was a turkey hunter. And he was avid about turkey hunting and deer hunting. And I said, well, look at this. And I showed him. It'd been raining the past couple of days, so it was muddy through there. So I showed him where I pulled up that Kubota the night before and stopped. I got out and I showed him where I walked around that thing. You could see where I'd walk. I'd push down the grass where I walked around it. And in the center of where I'd walked around, I showed him a set of footprints that we measured them. They were 18 and a half inches long and 7 3/4 inches wide at the toes. And I said, you see this right here? I said, "Oh, come here!" And I took and I showed him that footprint that I'd found that where he when he turned and he jumped, he took 15 feet step. I said, "There's where he touched down the ground first." And he said, "What is that?" I said, "It's a big old ape looking thing." I said, "I done showed you on video what it is. Y'all laugh at me." And he said, "Well, this wasn't what it this wasn't that thing, was it?" I said, "Yeah, it was that thing." He said, "You got that close to it?" I said, "Listen, I thought y'all done fix something up in the field. I'm out here by myself all night long, and I thought somebody put something up on pulling a gag on me." I said, "I got close to it." He's like, "How close did you get?" I said, "Closer than you would have wanted me to get." I said, I shined the light in his eyes, and his eyes didn't dilate. And I thought, okay, this has got to be some kind of doll. And I got out there, and that wasn't no doll, and it did that through there. So they called the game warden, and the game warden come down there, and game warden tried to tell us first that it was somebody's pet gorilla that got loose. And I asked him, I said, "Where in North Alabama is somebody got a pet gorilla?" He's like, "Well, just stay away from the deer population and any kind of bed and areas that the deer at. No, you'll be all right." I said, "If it's a gorilla, gorillas are vegetarians. They don't eat deer. Why do we need to stay away from the deer?" And the game warden got exasperated at me, and he kind of throwed his hands down and said, "Listen, you're too smart for your own good." He said, "Just leave that thing alone and it'll leave you alone." And that's pretty much how I did. When I was by myself at night, I used my video cameras from the plant, and I looked around the areas that I was going to have to patrol, the fence areas, before I went and patrolled. But there would be nights there was a big a pear tree on that property, and there would be nights when the pears would get ripe and they'd fall on the ground. I'd make my first uh, patrol around there, and there would be pears all on the ground. I'd come back 4 hours later, and there wouldn't be a pear on the ground. And I'm the only one there, so I knew something had to get them. Always figured that thing eat pears.
Yeah, definitely, man. Uh, Joe, it's been fun, man. It's been I appreciate you being on, brother. Unfortunately,
Well,
I'm running
I
out of time.
appreciate you having me on your show. Okay, well, listen, you have a good night, and I'll talk to you later.
Oh, you're fine, brother. I think my Zoom was delayed a little bit, but I want to thank Joe Flippo for being on. Everybody check out Seth's Daily Podcast every Sunday at 5 p.m. on nighthawk-radio.com. Check out Nighthawk Radio on Facebook, Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube as well. Also, we're on YouTube Music. And listen to Awakening Radio every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everybody have a good night and God bless. Thank you, Joe.